Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Community Connection. As is our tradition, we always, when she's available,
Which is rare,
when
apparently.
she decides to come to work, we
Yes.
like to check in with Gen Z's ambassador to the baby boomers, the Melvinator. Good morning.
Good morning.
How did you get the name the Melvinator?
Well, I hate to say I volunteered it, but I did. It was my brother's video game username growing up. It was Melvinator6 for LeBron James's basketball number. So
Is that right?
yeah.
So it's not a play off of the Terminator?
I mean, it could be.
I mean, because you're like the opposite of the Terminator.
What do you mean? Is it just because I'm so nice?
Yes, because you're so nice.
Okay, good.
Right, and usually the Terminator showed up on time to assassinate whoever he had to
The
assassinate, right?
Terminator can show up whenever he wants. He gets it done.
if the Terminator remembers to come to work.
But, yeah. We love you, Melvinator.
Love you too.
Miss Claudia, you look lovely in your pink. Is that a blouse or shirt? I don't know what to say
I
about
don't know. And every day when I get dressed on Thursday morning, I think I really am tempted to try to find something that he's not going to say is lovely, but you always say it just to mock
Because you
me.
are, because I'm not mocking. Mm-hmm. You know the difference in my language now. Okay, I'm mocking.
Okay. Admit it.
Yeah. Hey, we have a dear friend with us today that everybody will know as soon as you introduce him. But he's kind of special to us, isn't he?
He sure is.
We've been hanging around here making things better for a long time.
Yep.
Why don't you introduce him?
Well, first, I want to ask you a question before I introduce him.
All right.
How many times does an adult learner need to hear something before they actually have it cemented in their head? Do you know?
I would say something in the 60s. Is that, no?
If you're in your 60s, you have to have
okay.
60. I think it's more like 10 or something.
Oh, is
but
it? Okay.
I don't know what the research says. Maybe some of you do. But we used to have this at the former place I used to work. We used to call it the puke factor.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say it so often that you, as a leader, feel like you want to puke because you've said it so much, then finally everybody gets it. So today
All right.
we're kind of
Get
we're
somebody
trying
to puke?
we're not there yet. But we're going to do some things that if you were at the gathering in January, you've heard. If you were at staff meeting in February, you heard. If you were at the gathering,
At the trustee meeting.
gathering the other day, you heard it. If you were at the board meeting, you heard it. But we still need to keep hearing it.
Yes.
So I have a second question for you before we introduce our guests.
All right.
This is sort of build up for the mystery, isn't it? If you haven't already guessed who it is. We talk about the Vision 30 being something that when we first thought of it back on July 3rd, 2017, you compared it to Kennedy putting man on the moon.
Yep.
And so tell me a little bit about how you see Vision 30 being similar to the things that NASA had to do and the mistakes that they had to make.
Remember, the 60s was a pretty bold decade. Kennedy had challenged the nation to put a man on the moon and bring him back safely by the end of the decade. And that was prompted by the Soviets sending satellites in space. We knew we were behind, so this was a way to kind of kickstart the nation into catching up. But, after Kennedy, Johnson came along, he declared war on poverty. We were going to end poverty as we know it in our lifetime, right? So they were big, bold ideas. We've kind of missed that as a nation, right? And obviously we accomplished the man on the moon. We didn't accomplish solving poverty. But I admire the fact that we tried, right? We looked at policy, we looked at programs, a number of things. And we would say we got better because of both of those things. And I just felt like foster care is one of those places where we're behind on what that means and what that looks like. We forget that foster care once replaced the orphanage movement and the way we took care of kids. It was an improvement. It was an upgrade, obviously, an upgrade from that. Well, why do we settle that, right? This is it. It's obvious, right? We're obviously at a place where the system is breaking under its own weight. And so we've got to find new ways to deal with this, look at it differently. And Vision 30 is our attempt to just say we're going to boldly go where no one's gone before and try to tackle this issue. We don't have all the answers, but they didn't have the answers when they started, right? It took, for both of those initiatives, for NASA and the poverty, it took collaborations from lots of different people to come to the table and say, let's do it this way. They learned, they made mistakes, but they kept going at it. And we should never stop trying to solve the poverty issue, even though Jesus said you'll always have poverty.
Right.
Well, does that mean we don't take care of the poor? Well, at the same time, he said we'll always have poverty. We have this biblical mandate to take care of the poor. We'll always have orphans, right? We'll always have kids who are vulnerable. But we're also called into orphan ministry. So that's what this space is about. That's what Vision 30 is about.
Right, and I think that we've even recently got new insight, figured out some new things that we didn't know how to explain 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And as we keep coming back, it's like, why do you keep changing this? Why do you keep? But I can imagine the NASA folks had an idea. This is how we're going to get, somebody to the moon. And then they had to scratch that idea. And then they had to come up with something new. And then 2 or 3 years later, they came up with something different and tweaked it. And so
the movie Hidden Figures shows that really well, particularly with some local Virginia people who were a part of that. And the frustration, right? Some of those early mathematicians, or the computers, they called them. So you guys keep changing it every day. I do the math, and the next day you say, nope, that's not going to work.
Right. And I think sometimes we have people in our community that think, well, why are you coming back with another version of this? But with a problem that big, you have to have multiple versions and multiple insights. And so we have a chief strategy officer that keeps helping us get better with this. And that's who our guest is today. So welcome, Mr. Herron.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Claudia, Mr. Day.
I like how it's Mr. Day. Claudia.
That's right.
I like that. So we're going to let you go ahead and talk about some of the most recent insights that we've had and you've had as to how to explain this whole Vision 30 thing. And we'll just let you go, and we won't interrupt you until you're done.
Well, as you guys remember, early on, we were working on our nomenclature, what we're going to say, and a lot of the things we said kind of sounded like we were against foster care and trying to make it go away.
Obliterate it.
May I just say obliterate the child welfare industrial complex?
I wasn't going to quote that, but
that was a bold statement. It got everybody's attention.
Yeah, particularly the director of DSS who overheard you and loved it.
So we worked on clarifying that because it's not against foster care, so it's eliminating the need of foster care and focusing on what causes the need of foster care. And so we looked at the big things, the social issues, and we tended to say things like poverty and mental illness and addictions of all kinds. And if you looked at any specific case of someone in foster care, almost always one of those or multiple of those are involved. And those are major issues, and they're generational. So the more we talked about that, it's started creating some cognitive dissonance, because it's like, if on the one hand we're saying we're going to eliminate the need for foster care, but on the other hand we're saying it's caused by these kinds of things, you start thinking, what does that mean? We have to eliminate those in order to eliminate. And so working through that and getting some clarity and trying to solve that cognitive dissonance, began to realize that those aren't really the direct cause of state custody foster care. Those are the reasons that families are struggling, that they're fractured or fragile, and those are the reasons kids are often in danger or in risk. But if you think about it, state custody foster care had to come into play because the kids weren't being kept safe. And as you mentioned, the biblical mandate, it's really the responsibility of the church and then the broader community. Yeah. And so, Liam, if you want to show the slides, a statement that we now are making to just give this more and more clarity is the reason state custody foster care exists is because the church and the community have not been effective in protecting children and families from these these generational effects of these things. Now, from that, we've kind of made a real bold statement that may sound harsh, but we believe it's true. Children in state custody foster care and youth aging out of foster care without a circle of support actually are indictments of the church and the community, not of the state.
Yeah.
Sometimes people like to blame the state for this foster care system and the shape it's in, but the church and the community are the ones who have not been providing this.
And I said I wasn't going to interrupt you, but,
please
but
do.
ouch,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We don't want to hear that. We don't
Right.
want to be held responsible for that.
But you could apply that into some other areas, right? We blame the police for policing, right? Well, they have to police because we're not doing a good job
Right.
of, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, if you look at a community and the community has kids in foster care, they're not taking care of the kids. I liken it somewhat to a storm. We can't stop the storm, but we must build shelters for children and families to protect them from the storm. And this makes sense. We hear on the weather that a storm's coming and it's going to hit the coast. People don't get together and start talking about how can we stop the storm, how can we turn this around. They begin making sure everybody has shelter, particularly the most vulnerable, the most at risk. Make sure they have shelter from the storm. But then there's also often follow-up to that, kind of long-range solutions that come out of the problem. Let's not rebuild these houses in the floodplain. Let's build a better seawall to protect from the sea surge. And so it's not just helping them get through the storm, but it's helping us to learn how to then protect them in an ongoing way. So we've developed a little bit of a chart that kind of visualizes how this needs to look and can look, and how we know we can actually bring this about. Right now you're looking at a bell curve, and I want you to think about everything underneath that curve as being all the things that we do in this community for children and families who are at risk. All the energy, all the resources, all the programming, all the money. And the chart represents a reality that there's actually very little being done in prevention. There's some, but much less prevention than intervention. And we're calling on this chart reconciliation, those long-term solutions, the things you've learned.
Changes, cultural changes, generational changes.
The things that you've learned from the problems and you can put them in place, such as adoption or reunification of a family, or building a circle of support around a family that's going to help sustain them. But as the chart represents, most of the energy goes to intervention. And that's really where we can put state custody foster care, if you think about it. State custody foster care is an extreme form of intervention. It's when you've done all the other things and nothing's working, and the only thing left to do is for the state to step in, take a child or children from a home.
It really is emergency intervention.
It's emergency intervention. And so what we need to do, what we're challenging ourselves and others in the community, and it's why we can actually make a difference, is that we want to change this bell curve to more of a dome as we're working together to eliminate the need for state custody foster care. So if you look at that, it's like if we moved more energy and resources towards the prevention end and more resources and energy towards the reconciliation, it will reduce the need for this extreme type of intervention. So what that means is influencing increased focus on prevention, increased focus on sustained reconciliation, and because of that, it can eliminate the need for state custody foster care. Now, one of the ways to think about this, to relate it to our river video, and I'm sure we're going to be playing that again after this show. If you think about it, the prevention side of this chart is going upriver, going upstream, getting as far upstream as you can, doing things that will help keep the kids from going into the river. The reconciliation may be a little harder to think about on the river, but part of what happens is we do, through intervention, we get children or kids or families out of the river, but then we rush back in to help someone else, and we just leave them sitting there by the side of the river. And then it doesn't take much for them to destabilize.
maybe the reconciliation is using the video analogy is making sure they actually move to the other river. Until they're in that other river, safe with a thriving, healthy family. The work of reconciliation is not done.
It's not just the rescue, it's then the restoration, the reconciliation.
Yeah.
And it may actually be when you work with these families that the river, that there are people who zigzag at different seasons in their life, right?
That's true.
And they can be in the healthy river for a season, but if they lose that support or something happens, one of those dangerous things could take them back in and they can go back and forth.
Yeah.
So there's some very specific strategies, approaches, and we've identified some of those on the prevention end. There's all the research about the 5 protective factors, and there's a basis that if you help families do these or achieve these, that it will strengthen the family and it will protect them. So you see how that's prevention. And then if we're talking specifically about youth, there's exciting research that's been done, the 40 developmental assets. And it's actually specific things that have been identified that the more of these that a youth or a young person has in their life, the better their chances are of being successful and being healthy. But there are things that you can help them achieve, help them attain. On the other end, when I'm talking about reconciliation, we're creating community, making sure the community is taking responsibility for these kinds of things, and also what we call building circles of support. Specific, we don't just leave it to chance, specific families, churches that are identified as being the circle of support around.
It's got to be intentional.
It's got to be intentional and sustainable, ongoing. So to kind of look at that in whole, we believe that the significant reduction in the number of children in state custody foster care then will be an indicator that we're doing better, that the church and the community are doing better with prevention and long-term reconciliation. What's really neat, I think is really neat, is when you start looking at these 4 particular programs and these 4 particular approaches, that a key aspect to all of them is meaningful relationships. It's helping the youth develop these meaningful relationships and families develop these meaningful relationships. So what we're talking about is building resilience through meaningful relationships.
And that's not rocket science. To use our NASA, right?
Yeah.
Meaningful relationship is something all of us can do, whether we have a degree or not a degree, whether we can do math or not do math. Meaningful relationship is something in fact, not only can we do it, but we're called to do it. That's what it means to be a disciple of Christ, right? And to be a follower of Jesus. Meaningful relationships. Jim, I love this, and let's take a break. We're going to watch a video about our camp, and we talked about 40 developmental assets, right? In a healthy family, most of that's going to happen, but even in a healthy, thriving family, there's a sense that you need community to round out those 40 developmental assets, and a beautiful place for that happens for many, many kids is summer camp. Take it away, Leah.
I've actually known about Hat Creek Camp since I was about 12, and so then when I was getting into wanting to work with foster kids and going to social services and stuff like that, I was that would be a great opportunity.
This is my 3rd summer at camp. I'm here for the counselors so that they can best serve the kids. Whatever the counselors need, however they need support, whenever they need direction or planning and that kind of structure.
So at camp, you have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and there's almost no in between. You are forced to grow, and it really just matters where you grow or how you grow, but you will grow as a person. Laying my vulnerabilities down at the foot of the cross has been a huge lesson I've learned. And again, the kids help you learn that, because the kids come up and they have no filter and they'll immediately just pull at anything that you could be vulnerable about yourself.
These kids have enough going on at home, a lot of them. And I want them to just be a kid. I want them to just be able to exist and be and get better and heal. If I can play a small part in that by giving them a cup of water or making them smile or just showing them you matter, you're not just a number, you're not just a person in a place. That's what I love about camp, is you get to do that every day.
So honestly, I've learned to just have fun, to dance at a dance party, to sing louder than I've ever sang in my life, to just smile and have fun, because that's what the kids need. It's summer camp. They don't need, you to sing on the right key or to say the word for right. They need you to just love them and just to have fun.
The people that are either here year round or the people that are seasonal and they come in just for the summer, you know that God's here. He's present, he's working. It feels like a home. We're a smaller camp. We don't have as many kids or as many cabins or the biggest property, but we've got the Lord and we really love these kids. And that's what we build everything else on.
Not only does summer camp help develop those 4D developmental assets that we were talking about, like friendship and leadership and cooperation and all of those kinds of things. What I'd like is when you heard from summer staff, right, most of them are college students coming in, working the summer, but think of what's developing for them, right? Mm-hmm. They're learning leadership skills and stuff that's going to go with them throughout their adult life and their profession. So it's just beautiful things happen at camp. So how do we wrap this up, Jim? What's the most important thing that we need to take away if we haven't figured this out already? Obviously, meaningful relationships.
Right.
And I think we probably, as an organization, got to start defining that in some ways that everybody says that is meaningful.
Yeah.
Any idea?
Well, I think one of the toughest things right now in this season, and as we're sharing this and talking to other organizations and churches, is there just such a tendency to focus on the intervention, and there's reasons for that, because that's where the pain is, and that's where people are crying out. That's where the urgency is. And so we really have to start training ourselves to think prevention, getting upriver, and the focus has got to be on that. And so then you say, well, how do you do that? And then that's when you really start, you got to connect with people and build those relationships. One of the ways I've been talking about this when you're trying to think in terms of prevention and reconciliation is just think about a person that you're helping today, that you've been working with, they're in a crisis, and you're working through this intervention. Think about what would have made a difference that if it happened in their life 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. What could have happened 5 years ago that would prevent them from being in this place today? Then that's what we need to get busy doing, those kinds of things. And on the other side, it would help this person, and now they're stable, and I don't want to just leave them here beside the river. I need to think, what needs to happen over the next 5 years so that 5 years from now, they're still in this stable place. So it's relationships are out there. That's where we gotta build them.
And I mean, there's enough data to show us what needs to happen 5 years in advance, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, because we know that this will lead to that. Mm-hmm. Statistically speaking, from a bell curve perspective, this is what's going to happen. We also we know from the other end of that too, right? If the intervention isn't carried out, what will happen? So again, that's not right. We do have science on it, but it's also just common sense. So what? Off the top of your head, what would be some of the key terms or that would define meaningful relationship? What are the components of that?
Well, connection. There's got to be that connection, and that involves, a commitment of time, a commitment of resource, a genuine caring and regard for the person. These relationships often start out as a helping relationship. And so you're actually bringing to the person resources, but over time, then they're part of the solution, and it becomes this more of a equal, if you will, kind of relationship moving forward, where they're valued in that relationship.
That's hard to do in the context of a program, isn't it?
Yeah,
because programs often they don't measure meaningful relationship. They just measure activity. You got this done. You check this off. Move them on because we've got more coming down the river. So for me, when I think about this, I think you got to add reciprocity, right? Programs are always, the helper is helping, you're receiving, it's transactional, we're done. In a true relationship that's meaningful, there's always a two-way, right? There's a give and take. We both put into this thing because we're both going to get something out of that. Would that be a fair?
Yes. It moves towards that, and I think Care Portal is a great illustration because Care Portal is this tool that we have, and if we have to have the right mindset, though, that it's not just the transaction, not just helping the person, the family in this moment, but it's building a relationship then that will help grow them over time, and that's what we mean by meaningful relationship, not just in a moment, but over time.
Right, and I think that we've concluded, let's say people, because if you're going to do a meaningful relationship with someone outside of your family, your church, your job, all the relationships you already have, right? It's going to take time.
Yep.
And so let's assume that people have capacity to have 4 of those, right? And we have 50 staff here. And so we're going to serve 200, if I did the math right, 200 people, right? That's it, right? And then there's this, so we have to have a community willing to do this. And if everybody was willing to do 1 or 2 of these, if every person of faith in Lynchburg and the 4 surrounding counties, their family is willing to do with 1 family to build this meaningful relationship. And it's funny we're talking about this today because I have a friend that I met through Care Portal almost 4 years ago, and we're having lunch today. And I've been through all kinds of things with her, but one of the most profound things she said to me, and I repeat it often, she said, I've thought about it for a long time, and outside of my family, you're the only person who's ever cared about me that didn't get paid to. And to her, that made a huge difference.
Meaningful.
It's meaningful if sure, she had lots of social workers in her life that cared about her, but in the back of her mind, they cared about her because they got paid to. And so we as professionals, in our roles at a nonprofit, can have these meaningful helping relationships with people. But if we're getting paid to, it doesn't count as much as if we have volunteers in the community that are willing to build those.
That's why I think the church is so uniquely positioned, if you will, because that's what the church is called to. But often they don't know who these people are or have contact, and Care Portal can put them in contact with these people. And now it can be a family to family, an individual to individual, and just let God work through that and build that relationship.
So, Clay, what are the barriers that are going to keep the average person in the pew who, love their church, follow the Lord, want to do, something of service? What's the barriers that's keeping them from moving into that meaningful space?
Well, I think fear.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
I've never done it before. It's something new. Not wondering if they're going to have the tenacity to go through the highs and the lows. Maybe a lack of preparation or training, which we're working on and we have opportunities for. But I think people who've never done it before have to do it the first time before they can say that they've done it. And I think that for a lot of people, it's that first step into that world that's the hardest because anything new and different is frightening. And so they'd rather just stay where they are and be safe. But
do you have to build a tolerance for messy?
Yeah, but if you never go into messy, you don't build the tolerance for
That's
it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you stay safe.
But you think about our church life, our church world, where we're trying to clean up messes. I mean, our own mess. We want to avoid mess. We want to avoid the appearance of mess because of whatever weird thing that's maybe going on in that community. But then we're asking people to purposely step into somebody else's mess, and that can be uncomfortable. It's scary
and
risky, right? What if this doesn't go well? Or
well, and I've written my devotional for tomorrow morning already that I'm going to share, but it really struck me that Matthew 25 is either one of the most beautiful passages of Scripture where Jesus separates the sheep and the goats, or it's the most tragic. Because if we miss Jesus when we don't feed the hungry, when we don't take care of the poor, when we don't provide clothing, when we don't visit the jail, when we don't go to the hospital and see sick people, that's where Jesus is when we're missing it. And so the tragedy and the heartbreak of people who have done everything that they're supposed to do except that, to enter and see Jesus say, "Depart from me, you're cursed," That's heartbreaking to think of a person who was 100% in their faith for their whole life. They tithed, they had quiet time at 5 a.m., right? But they never took that step, and they missed out on being able to minister to Jesus as he walks through our community. Yeah. And to me, that's tragic. And that's where I think when I see Care Portal, I see it every single time in the back of my mind. I have an opportunity to meet Jesus. Do I want to do that today or not? And that's pretty powerful.
It is. Jim, you get the last word.
Okay.
You get the final word.
Well, then I will just kind of challenge our listeners, our watchers today, to just begin thinking and praying about that, recognizing that God has called you to these meaningful relationships, and they will make a difference. It will make a difference over time. You can hear Vision 30, and it just sounds so huge, so big, but God is doing it, and God is doing it one person at a time, one heart at a time. And as Mr. Day was saying earlier, it's transformative, not just for the person you're helping, but for you as well. It will make you different.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you,
Claudia. And thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next week on Community Connection.
Nobody gets to choose their family. If a person is fortunate enough to be born into a healthy family, then life can be much like floating down a smooth, gentle river in the summertime. But an unhealthy family is like a dangerous river, filled with rocks, debris, and fast-moving water. This river swiftly leads to the steep waterfall of adulthood, tragically forming a new river of dysfunction. Even if you aren't born into an unhealthy river, there are many streams that cause a person to get there. But there is only one way to get out, and that is through a meaningful relationship. Across our region, there are many agencies, churches, and families who are devoted to helping children escape from unhealthy rivers. Some feel their role is to wade in and rescue children. They foster, adopt, or provide safe families. Others stand by the river and support the rescuers by providing what they need. Still, others are upstream and stand in the gap to keep children from ending up in the negative situations. At Patrick Henry Family Services, we see ourselves as having an additional role. We are running up and down the shores of the unhealthy river, screaming, "Can't you see the children in the water? You have to do something." Vision 30 is a 10-year initiative. By 2030, we envision a region where all children are safe in their own family, or with caregivers who are supported by a local faith community. So, where do you stand at the river? Are you upstream, keeping families together and strong by standing in the gap? Are you in the river, directly impacting children? Are you on the shore, providing support for the brave folks who have entered the river? Or are you just passing by without noticing? No matter who you are, come down to the river with us. Let us help you find your place. Not only will lives be changed, but you will never be the same.